Hi, and welcome to Artisan Training 3818 Vehicle Checklist Part 1. Here we're going to discuss why we use checklists, how we use checklists, and the first 10% of what's on a checklist. You got to understand that each team is going to have a color. We'll have a green team, a brown team, whatever. All the tools on that team's van must have that color tape or paint on the tool. We do this because sometimes we'll have many teams working together on the same project. On this project, we had 6 different teams of artisans there, and so there's tools from all different vans out on that floor. We got to make sure that all the tools go back to the right team. So all the tools on any team's van should have that color tape or paint on the tool. So this solvent sprayer, it's seen some high miles, but you'll note that it's got yellow tape on the body and yellow tape on the wand in case the wand gets separate. This is so, again, when we work together, the right tools end up on each van. The checklist has all the things that an artisan needs to do day-to-day work and to solve problems as they pop up. You'll notice that it's written in English and Spanish because some of us are still learning English or still learning Spanish. And there's a spot for notes so that you can make things that you'd like changed on the checklist. Every time you do this, it should get a little bit better. You can arrange it so that it's more logical. You can arrange the stuff in your van so it's easier to get the things you use most, and then edit the checklist so that it fits the actual van. Some of the things are too big, expensive, or infrequently used to keep on every van every day, so we keep them in a shop and we scan them out for the day to do whatever you need to do. Everything on the van is either scanned out for the day or is on the checklist. The MTM will scan in everything that was used yesterday and then scan it back out today fresh, and we do this to try to be as efficient as we can as a team. By having everything possibly needed to improvise and solve problems with the team, automatically, artisans are equipped to overcome any challenges, and they don't have to think too hard when they first come in the morning. They can focus on the job that they're going to, understanding who we're serving, and just know that like these 120 items or whatever on your checklist are handled. You don't have to think about it. By getting tools and materials back into the shop that are only needed for special projects, other teams are able to use them, and we become more efficient as a whole team. Again, we're here to do more with less. Buying a bunch of tools is not productivity. Doing more with less is productivity, and that's what pays the bills. We'll dig a little deep into this. I know this is more philosophical than tactical, but it's important to know. You gotta know that things naturally turn to crap. Here on Earth, as it is written, moth and rust destroy. Physicists came up with a cool word for this called entropy. That's a gradual decline into disorder. Now, we human beings are here to bring order into the chaos, and that's the sum of a lot of little things put together. It starts with your thinking. You gotta think more about the mission and the other people on your team than you do about yourself, or it can go sideways. I'll illustrate with some pictures here. A team has to create more value than the sum of its members, or it can, will, and should die. So you see 4 individual contributors here, and they have good structure, system, they're doing good teamwork, and so they'll produce more service and therefore then more money than a quarter of that box, and more than each of those boxes put together. And they have to, because you have expenses like payroll, materials, insurance, taxes, and that gap between the service we create and money we get against the money that has to go out to feed everybody, to pay for materials, to keep the vans insured, to keep tires on them, oil changes, all that junk. That gap is called margin, and that's what we use to grow as a company, to grow you as a person, and to give. Now, it's not automatic. If we don't work at being good as a team, things naturally turn to crap, meaning that we will produce more than any one person could, but not more than 4 contributors added together. And that's dangerous because those 4 people still have families that have to eat, and we'll end up spending more than we take in and we go out of business. Again, 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 has to equal more than 4, or an organization ought not exist. And if it does exist, it creates lifetime opportunity for everyone who's a part of it. If we're not mindful of this, selfishness and small-mindedness will result in the ugly shell of a business that we are all embarrassed to have been part of. It's not happening here. So here's how we win as a team. We use the checklist to make sure the van is fully stocked once a week so that we don't waste any trips. We make the checklist a bit better every time we use it. We remove the things that we don't really need. We add things that would be really handy to have. And we make tips on how everything could be arranged better. We use the checklist as a training tool. Now, the team leader is responsible for getting it done, but they're encouraged to work through the least experienced apprentice on the team, because that person understanding the tools and materials that we use is step one to them becoming an artisan and a master artisan. Okay, to recap, we've gone over the why and the how of checklists. Why do we do this? Big answer, to work better together. We want to make sure that we have everything needed to overcome unexpected challenges of a job. And we never want to drive 3 people 45 minutes one way and we got to come back tomorrow because we can't patch a hole. That's crazy. We want to make sure that we keep everything that we started with in good working order. Nothing goes up in smoke. Stuff doesn't actually disappear. It just gets misplaced. And if we stay on top of it, if you notice that you don't have a hose today and you had a hose yesterday, you just go where you were yesterday and you get your hose back. So once a week, the team leader is going to confirm that all the tools and materials on the truck are 100%. And again, they're encouraged to work through the newest apprentice on the team to do that. Now we're going to dig into the what that is on the checklist. We're going to go line by line and fully train you on each item that's in the truck. The purpose is to make you an expert who can prevent problems and solve them as they come up. Excellence is a sum of many little things. There aren't any unimportant things. Each little step added together is what makes greatness. Okay, so we start on the purple team's checklist in the back. They've got 3 5-gallon buckets. One of xylene, one of acetone, and one of CSS. Now these buckets must be full. It's 5 gallons, not 4. So let the MTM know what job you used, whatever you use when you're topping it off, so that they can account for that material to that job. The bucket should have the team color on it, meaning that like put a big old purple X if it's your xylene bucket, or an A if it's your acetone bucket, in purple tape or purple paint so that you get your stock back on your truck if you're ever working with another team on a bigger job. The acetone bucket should have a paper to write how dye was diluted so that if you mix up dye with the acetone in that bucket, you can label it correctly and another team can use the leftovers. Again, we want to do more with less so that we can grow and we can give and we can be good stewards of what we've been given. The next thing on the list was magic trowels. You want to keep the guard on them if you can. Either way, you want to double check the edges. They can become frayed, and if you do that, here's a little trick how you're just going to make it brand new but half an inch smaller. You're going to put it on the chop saw, as we call it. You're going to start from the plastic side and go in. You'll notice that the softest part of the trowel does not get cut off by the chop saw, and so then you'll take a knife and finish that cut, and voila, new magic trowel. You want to have uncommonly good common sense, meaning that you just square stuff away. The dustpan should lay flat. The dust broom should be clean. If that thing gets super dusty and you're doing a little work in a finished home and you go get your broom and it actually leaves more dust on the floor than it sweeps up, boy, it's not a good feeling. You're not making fans, not really creating value, so you want to get that looking right. The shop vac filter may need washing. You want to square that away at the shop while you're going through the checklist so that when you're on the job, that thing's clean and it's good to go. Your applicator pads have to feel soft. You want them to be clean. You want them to lay down that stain guard beautifully when you're on the job. This is the time to throw those ones in a washing machine and get some clean ones if they're not like that. Everything should be neatly in a labeled spot. When the door opens on that van, it should look like a cabinet maker's workshop. Just get it square. It feels so good to get legit respect from a real builder that knows what craftsmanship looks like, and it starts with your van and your checklist. You got to understand the time spent here making this great will make you more efficient in the field, and that's when people are watching and we really want to kill it. You don't just make sure you have sprayers, you make sure your sprayers work. You put a little bit of water in each sprayer and test it, and that way you'll see if you have all the seals in it or if some of the seals are wearing and you're not able to build pressure in the sprayer real quickly. Go out into the field with tools that you can trust and attach the wands to the sprayer, especially the solvent sprayer. At the factory, they put little clips where you can just snap that thing on. You might have seen that in that earlier picture with the yellow tape. You got to know the different full-size sprayers. The yellow ones are for acid only, not acetone, not densifier, not stain guard, not sealer for sure. And you want to make sure that they've got seals between the wand and the tip. You also want to make sure there's a similar seal between the wand and the trigger mechanism. There's a filter ahead of that trigger that you got to make sure is 100% clean. Black acid stain and walnut acid stain especially will clog up that filter, and then the sprayer just doesn't work as good as it should. The red and white sprayers are for acetone and dye. You got to check seals in all the same places, make sure it builds pressure, and use that only for acetone, not acid, not sealer, not densifier, not stain guard, not anything but acetone and dye. Everything else goes in your black sprayer. With those, a lot of times we'll spray solvent-based sealer, and so it's critical to clean it well with xylene and then turn around and use soap and water to get the xylene out of it so that you can use that for other things and so that the hose doesn't get crappy where it first comes out of the sprayer. Those things, if the xylene is around it long enough, it'll get soft, it'll start to bulge. It could even explode while you're using it, which is very uncomfortable and not safe at all. Know the different 48-ounce sprayers. There's one that's for acid only. Do not put sealer or acetone in those. There's one that's for acetone only. These are incredibly handy when you're touching up with dye. You don't want to put sealer or acid stain or anything else in those. You want to save those for acetone. The little red ones are cheap enough that you can put whatever you want in those. In fact, sometimes it makes sense to put sealer in there knowing that you've only got 15 minutes before that thing is going to be ruined, just to get you through the job if you have to make that happen at a right angle, small sprayer. Sometimes that makes sense. The red and white ones are the closest thing to disposable / recyclable. All right, framing square and mop head. It's kind of cool. It turns out there's a tongue and a blade to a framing square. I didn't know that. So you learn something new every day, right? You got to know that those are almost impossible to bend in the way that matters. Meaning that if your framing square gets mishandled and bent a little bit and it doesn't lay flat on the concrete immediately, it's still totally usable. You can bend it straight. You're not going to bend it out of square. It's just going to be lumpy. But be careful with it and create a spot so that doesn't happen. Extra mop heads are very important if your first job involves mopping with a solvent. Sometimes you're just going to have to throw those away, but you're certainly not going to want to use them again that day. The wands are actually listed separately. I keep my wands with my sprayer when I'm in the field. This wand is the one for acid spraying. They're usually green or black. The way that you'll recognize them is they're thick, they're flexible, and they're plastic. Now the acetone sprayer is kind of plastic, kind of metal. It feels plasticky on the outside, but it's rigid. Again, the acid sprayer's it's flexible. The acetone sprayer, if you bend it, it breaks. If somebody uses an acid sprayer for acetone, they'll make it really floppy, and that's bad. So you got to know the difference between the two wands. The wand for the metal sprayer is metal, and it doesn't fit anything else, so that's a tough one to screw up. But you want to keep the tips good on those. Those sprayers come with two tips, one that's high flow, one that's low flow. There's usually a little keeper on there that goes with it. If you somehow lose the keeper, make a keeper out of tape and keep that stuff together. The sprayer wands should stay attached with the sprayers. If you don't want to do that, just keep them really close and double check them. All right, that's all we're going to do for this one. We'll pick it up next Wednesday with part 2 vehicle checklist. Thank you for watching.